Hello and welcome to the Game Dev Local Podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Clark, he, him, and as you know, I am on a podquest to learn everything you want to know about game dev, but never dared to ask. And in our ongoing series, I'm delighted to have my double act partner, the leader, our El Capitan of GDL, Stuart De Ville. Stuart, just in case people don't know who you are, do you want to say who you are and everything else?
Hello, I'm Stuart De Ville. I am founder of what is now Game Dev Local. I run my studio called Triply Games, and I freelance as a 3D generalist and consultant for new indie studios, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff, but we won't get into any of that.
What is that? And I just realized I never actually say who I am. So I've been around. I'm very old. I've been around forever, even back in the dawn of time when there were dial-up modems. If you could, heaven forbid, think of such things. I wrote a book 10 years ago called Games as a Service that happened to predict the fact that we would be in a situation where 80% plus of the revenue in the games industry happens to come from live ops. Oh wait, that's what I wrote about. I've got a new book coming out on the 27th of March, which should probably be after this particular podcast comes out, although it is currently before then, called Playing with Balance on Game Economy Design. And I'm Chief Strategy Officer for a SaaS platform that's all about helping game developers work out how to make the best decisions about what to do for their live ops games. Anyway, enough of that. We are going to be talking about... Well, it is your little topic, so you tell us what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So I thought we could talk about mind blank. I thought we could talk about the like some of the issues that new indie studio founders have.
So we're basically going to have a therapy session where Stuart and I complain about what it's like being a founder for a company over many, many years. But I mean, for me, I'm going to bring to bear as someone who spent a lot of time doing consulting and supporting and mentoring, and as a Stuart, we'll talk a little bit about the experiences that we've witnessed as well. I've been lucky enough to work in massive telcos as the games guy, as well as working for teams like PlayStation. I was home architect on PlayStation Home, so I got to sit there working across the different departments across the world. We were one of the few teams that Sony actually had that talked to each other. I know that sounds weird, but Sony is very notorious for its silos. I've also worked as an indie. I've been a developer. I've raised money as a publisher, and now I'm a tech platform provider, which actually takes me back to before I got into games, when I worked for an SAP consultancy, and before that, worked on all sorts of classical IT stuff. Stuart, you had a whole bunch of questions you wanted to sort of take us through. You have a plan. Tell us what your first question is.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with charging ahead with an untested idea, which is unbelievably the number one thing that almost every new indie studio starts with.
I would never do that. I would never decide I was going to make a game based on the Rocky Horror Show and launch it regardless of the fact that there wasn't actually an audience that couldn't be clearly targeted, that are individually Rocky Horror people, apart from the fact they like Rocky Horror. Anyway, I didn't say that.
A classic example. So, like, I did the same thing. Started my studio based around an idea that I had decided was the idea, and here we are 2 studios later, where I'm making something completely different because I realized that you can't make a game that no one wants, and you shouldn't form a team around a game that no one wants. You should. There's so many steps that a lot of new founders skip, because
it's not even that no one wants. I think it's understanding that just because you liked a game doesn't mean you can remake it. And just because other people like that game too, doesn't mean they're an addressable audience.
And I think there's a lot of people are... The thing is, like, you need that drive, that passion to do it in the first place. Yeah, and to a certain extent, you need a certain level of naivety in order to take on board starting a studio, because in your head, starting a studio means working with some people that you like, working on a thing that you like, that's going to make money, and you'll all have a job and you'll all live happily ever after. you can't have that dream
Because that
smashed to
works.
pieces. You can't have that dream smashed to pieces before you even got going. And it's not just games, right? It's any entrepreneur trying to do anything business wise. You have to go in a little bit naive, because otherwise you just wouldn't. You'd be scared off, like the amount of work that you realize that it is as you go.
Exactly, and I'll check. So this actually fits really neatly with. Paul Kilder-Taylor, Gene, and a couple of other really amazing people, and I were sat there doing a micro talk session on pitching, lessons that can be learned from tech. And one of the key things I was talking about was that we've got to basically, if we're going to get people to consider us, and I'm not saying you have to have investment, there are lots of different models out there, but let's say you were going for investment. We've got to treat this as a business. It's not just about making a game. We're not after patronage. I mean, that's actually potentially an interesting option if you happen to know rich people who want your art. I don't know if that exists in games. I've never seen that exist in games, except maybe vicariously through some sort of game angel network or whatever. But my feeling is that essentially the problem we have is that we've got people who are going to investors or going to people to fund them saying, look at my pretty thing. I want to make my pretty thing. Let me make my pretty thing. Rather than saying, look at this thing. I've got an audience. I can demonstrate with real data that this actually has traction and that this thing can generate revenue, and that revenue can build a return. And don't you want to have part of that return, Mr. Investor?
Yep.
I mean, that's really the crux of it for me. It's like, if we're serious, I mean, if you're making a hobby, fine, go make a hobby.
Yeah.
But if you're making something commercial, that's a much more difficult conversation.
Most of the, I mean, the reason why this came up is because most of the indies that I speak to, especially like right now, not sure when this episode comes out, but probably GDLX will have happened. And right now, we have 60 indie game studios, or indie teams, who are producing a game, and they're showcasing that game. And so when I say I'm speaking to a lot of indies about this, I'm speaking to a lot of indies about this. And yeah, so it's kind of come up as, I mean, I've known this for a long time anyway. We've been doing this for a long time, but the one, like, one of the top key things that I keep hearing is, I've had this idea for a game, I'm forming a studio, I'm pulling a team together, like, and they're going a million miles an hour. And if I'm lucky, I manage to catch them in that moment and be like, check first. And they're like, check what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, like, you've got this idea, perfect. Have you made like the simplest version of it? Like, that's a great place to start. Can you make the skeletal bones of it? Can you make it on pen and paper?
I want to go earlier than that.
Yeah.
Ask why. Honestly, why is the first question we should be asking. Why are you going to make a game at all? And if you don't ask that question, how can you ask what success looks like? And if you don't know what success looks like, how do you know that the idea, the thing that you want to make, actually can fulfill the criteria that you're setting yourself to be able to make that thing work?
That actually works quite well, because what most of them say is one of two things. Is either, I've been in the industry a long time, I've been wanting to make this game for a long time, and I've now got the time and space to do it. And the other thing, sometimes in conjunction with this, but a lot of the time on its own, is I've been trying to get into the games industry for a long time. I've been living on the fringes. I make things, I create stuff. I now want to do it for myself. And yeah, why am I? Which is where I came from. Right? Why am I?
I think that's
myself?
incredibly valid. I mean, Brian Bagwell did a fantastic event called Hello World, up in Glasgow a few weeks ago, where he invited a whole bunch of students and people who've recently remained redundant. And one of his key phrases was, "There aren't enough jobs in games. If you want to make games, you've got to make a team." But he didn't stop there. He carried on, like you're saying, why do you want to make a game? Is there a market? Is there an audience? what are you doing strategically to ensure that you have a chance of success?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, like I say, just jump off the cliff with, I've got an idea. If we're lucky, then
That's me
they,
on a daily basis. It's probably about 5 times a day. I got an idea. I'm still trying to work on one that I came up with when I was up in Glasgow with Brian's event.
well, you and I have a whole different problem.
We have many problems.
Just not enough time to activate on all ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if I'm lucky, I'm talking to someone who has at the very least made a scrappy little something, and they've shown it to friends and family, and then I have to remind them that your friends and family are normally your strongest cheerleaders. If you're lucky, maybe your family and friends are rubbish, and
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that word.
and they will just brutally, honestly tell you, cut you down. You kind of need a balance, really, and the best way to do that is to pull your prototype together and showcase that in as many ways as possible. Whether you put up a thing on itch and just let the world know that it exists, get some form of like some kind of player feedback that will at least get you to a point where you can say, people are enjoying this. I think maybe actually it's worth taking to the next step. And the next step still, even then, is not diving into putting a team together and going into full production.
No, I mean, I would actually argue some of the best ways I've seen people do it comes from the hyper casual industry. And I'm not saying make hyper casual games at all. I don't like the business model. I think it's too short termist.
Mm-hmm.
However, the production strategies that the hyper casual teams introduced were all around data. And what I found fantastic about it was the idea of, well, let's put together 100 ideas, just single line sentences. Maybe, because you got to be able to explain what the game is very, very quickly. Because if you can't, you don't have something that an investor's going to latch onto. You don't have something that a journalist is going to latch onto, or a streamer. So you're going to have that snappy. This is what it is, and it's not good enough to just slam first person Fortnite like Harry Potter clone. Obviously there's many reasons why that's a bad idea, but you do need to know what it is and be able to communicate the aspiration of it very quickly. Now, if you have 100 of those and you pick out the top, say, 50, and then from that top 50, you go, right, well, which of these top 50 can I do a one-pager for? Maybe you do a paragraph for the 50, but then you do a one-pager for like 10 of them. And from the 10, maybe you pick 4 and you do game jam style builds of it. So, if you happen to be, comfortable with AI and you want to do it yourself, I am trying and experimenting with my prototyping using AI because I'm not a coder and I don't have the time and bandwidth to involve anyone else before I make a game. So I'm going to be playing around with things because I quite enjoy that. I'm very respectful of the challenges of that. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine. Please, we all have our particular take on the line there, but the ability to create something very, very simple to get it understand, is it workable? Is it actually usable? But not the whole thing, just the core mechanic. Now, if you can then go further and then maybe create a trailer, maybe get your coder in, get your art, maybe not even get your artist in, maybe you get some asset store art and you pay for that and you start using that and you create a 30-second trailer that explains the core idea that you had in your first sentence, and then maybe run that as an ad. The reason why that's interesting is because if you run an ad, it goes to people who you have no connection with. You're actually mimicking a real commercial outreach. And it is a game that you'd like to make if the audiences buy into it. And so if you then get to see which of these 4 ideas, maybe you'll do maybe just 2 of them and do 2 different art versions of those 2 mechanics. That's quite a valid mechanism. Then you'll be able to see from those sort of 8 variants or whatever, 4 variants, 8 variants, whatever, you'll be able to see very quickly which one resonates with an audience. And be upfront, send them to a page that says, we're thinking about making this game. What do you think? Should we make this game? Now, if you find that one or two of them are worthwhile, well, maybe you make the first one, and
Hmm.
not the whole game. Maybe just make the first 20 minutes of gameplay, the first kind of endless loop, and you've got to do all the other stuff. You're going to build the purpose, the progression, the optimization around it for later. But for
Hmm.
now, before we spend the money, let's find out if people are going to be willing to play it and get a day one retention. Because if you've got more than 20 minutes of play, the likelihood is people will play it, have a break, and then we find out if they go back to it. And that going back to it means you're onto something. However, it's not proof unless you can demonstrate that people are going to spend money or watch ads or whatever the commercial model
Yeah.
for the game is.
Yeah.
So it's worth thinking about data, getting data fast by spending the least possible to get the data. I think it's an incredibly effective way to work.
What would you say is the simplest way to run an ad? Because I think
So,
when people hear
yeah,
like run an ad, they're thinking like the technicalities of how
it's
do I run
actually
ads?
it's really easy. It's really easy. So basically, I would create a Facebook page.
Hmm.
Now, I happen to have one called Making the Game, which I use as my kind of placeholder. I will then go into Ad Manager, which is a part of the Meta Business tools. When you create a business page and you create a Meta page, you can go into the tools, and Ad Manager is one of those tools.
Hmm.
And in Ad Manager, I can take a 30-second video. So I've made a video. You can do it really easily now with things like Riverside, but typically I will use something like DaVinci, or if you happen to have Premiere and use that,
Hmm.
whatever video tool you have, I will typically create for these kind of tests just a 1350 by 760 portrait video, because that's the size that Facebook uses. And I think Meta is quite a good one for this as
Hmm.
testing, because you got a little bit more sensitivity or a little bit more flexibility on targeting. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that's the best way to market your game. I'm just saying from a testing point of view,
Yeah.
I can put a video ad up. By the way, when you create a trailer, think about the first 3 seconds about getting the attention of that person. I call it awareness because there's an acronym that we use in
Hmm.
marketing called AIDA: awareness, interest, desire, action. It's kind of mimics the way that people think and engage and evolve the way that what they feel about something. So
Yeah.
awareness first. That's the first 3 seconds or so. You've then got to build interest, and that's the next sort of 10 seconds or so. But as you get towards the sort of middle page, you're about to come to the end point. You want to have that sense of desire. Oh, this is the thing I want. What is it in your ad, in the gameplay mechanics, in the way you're displaying it, the characters you're showing off, whatever it is that you're doing in this test that gets people excited, that really shows the idea. You then want to end on an end page that says "Go get." And that's the action. You need a call to action, a kind of fear of missing out. Now, I'm you could argue these are fake ads because the game doesn't fully exist yet,
Hmm.
potentially.
Yeah.
However, I would argue this is a normal testing process that lots of people do, and as long as the page they go to is very clear and upfront about what they end up at, you're not going to end up alienating people. You've got to be very careful about it. Don't treat treat audiences with respect. But if you say that it's a demo before they go to the page, people behave differently than if you say that it's a demo when you get to the page.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Hmm.
So what you're trying to do is get the most authentic response. And so you can spend, say, £50 a day for 3 days. So it's not a huge amount of money. It's not trivial, but it's not a huge amount of money. You won't get perfect data, but what you do get is an understanding, because you'll see what the cost per install is at that level. Tends to be a pretty good number. I would hope that you could get something under $1.50, maybe $1.80, ideally. I've had like 4 cents it's not always. It's very rare that you get the 4 cents per click.
Mm.
Sorry, we're talking about CPM here, so cost per meal. So around 4 cents is amazing. because we're talking about the first stage of the ad. When you actually have something that they can download, it'll be slightly more expensive, depending on how desirable the game idea is. But again, I would still be looking at the 150 to 180 as the kind of level to expect for a test. Bear in mind, when we get to the stage where we have millions a month per spend, like a Scopely level Monopoly Go, they might be spending 5, 10, maybe even higher dollars per install. But that's because the scale of their reach.
I think, like you say, £150 for 3 days. That, to average Joe, that probably feels like that's £150. But I would like to let everyone understand on the flip side of that, yes, you spent £150, but you've just saved yourself. Let's say it didn't go well, no one was interested, it just died on its butt. You've just saved yourself months and months and months and months and years.
Years, potentially, yeah.
Where you didn't go ahead with that idea and start trying to pull a team together. Because also, once you pull a team together, if you pull a really good team together and you build something for like 6 months to a year, and then you try and ship it, and it all goes horribly wrong, it just goes down the pan. You've just burnt those connections. Those people,
you burn the connections, you burn the friends, you burn the investors if you had investors, you burn
everything's
an audience, community, everything.
And you could have spent £150 to get like just a bit of an understanding as to whether or not you should take that whole journey.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I would actually suggest you spending double that at least, because you having a comparison of game idea 1 versus game idea 2 is really effective. But you're not going to stop testing at that point. You're going to test at the idea.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to then retest when you get the first proper playable.
Mm-hmm.
That 60 minutes approximate of playability, ideally. Then you're going to test again when you get to the stage where you've added the purpose, the progression, what I call the context loop. You're then going to test again when you're going to do the monetization elements. In fact, even before the monetization elements, if you've got a game that's got social capital, cooperation, competition elements, any kind of social sharing. Would you say
that this testing method is more important for live ops games, or equally as important for either or?
So I think the testing concept is applicable across the board. Right. The way I take it, the way I apply it, happens to match my methodology around live ops games. But to be honest, every game has to be thought of in terms of a live ops element, by which I mean, if you've got a lot of single player games, you have a portfolio you're going to be building. You still got to manage your community experience if you have a portfolio of games. If you've got one-off game, fine, you market one-off game. But I think very few people are going to have a successful business with a one-off game. Yeah. And I think that's why. I think you made a good point in your notes. Just so I'm revealing that you shared notes on this one.
We were prepared.
The wonderful line that you used is, an idea isn't special, it's a hypothesis.
Yeah.
I think that's magic. And in fact, I think if anything, this is what the hyper-casual industry did, is it pulled back this idea that we're making, we're visionaries. We're coming up with a grand idea. We have to pull together a vertical slice that has all of the elements that demonstrate everything solidly, and we have to spend all that money, and then we hold it back from the player until the very last minute, and then we reveal, and they go wonderful, and they bow at our knees, or bow at, what I'm saying. That whole auteur nonsense. And if we step back, the hyper-casual said, no, we can actually check this and not spend all the money we don't need to spend.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a balance to be had. This kind of ties into the second talking point that I had, which is where people have this dream game. And I think
I've got some of them.
Right. And I think people need to think about dream games different to a game idea. Like, having a game idea, you can have game ideas all day long. You can see. A friend of mine actually saw an animation, and they decided that like in that animation was a cool idea for a game, and so they're like now tracking that. Like, there's lots of different ways you can come at it, but when you've got a dream game, your bias is off. Like, your whole you've been fantasizing about building this game for forever, and so you have to be very careful that, again, that you don't just pull together a team because you're like, no, but like, I've been dreaming about this for 10 years. There's no way this can't work. You've spent so long thinking about all the ways in which this will be wonderful, but you need to understand that even if you've created like a massive branching narrative and you've got like all of these systems developed and all that stuff, you've got this massive fantasy world. This whole thing is still a fantasy. It's still
Yeah.
It's still not a real thing, and it doesn't have to be made.
No.
You still need to have you still have to temper your you still have to temper
I think I'd go a
yourself.
little further.
Yeah.
No game survives contact with the enemy. The enemy being the audience, but also your development team. Because as soon as you, I mean, the players aren't really an enemy. It's a funny line.
Yeah.
I have to say that because some people think I'm serious. Some people thought when I was doing my angry voice that I was actually angry at a talk I gave once. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get across with that is games evolve the moment you start experiencing them. In fact, every time I built a board game, I tend to build board games for fun. Fun, is that the right word? I'll let someone else decide if it's fun.
We'll go with fun.
Board games are fun, but is making a board game fun, or is it a way of self-torture? But the point is that they never quite work out, and find that moment of finding the fun can be a long, arduous journey. And so when you have this beautiful, beautiful game idea, I had this wonderful idea of doing an MMO based on Age of Empires, but where every figure was an actual person playing it. So you had to have a community, and you would have to have some time when you spent being the woodchopper, being the farmer. Anyway, that would never work as a real game, but it was such a fun idea to think about. But that's my point, is that no game, no great idea is real. It's only real once we go through the impossible journey of the design process, the evaluation process, the delivery, the production, the optimization, all of the compromise. That's what delivers the game. And even then, the last 2% of delivery is the most difficult, just getting it shipped. It's non-trivial. Getting a game out at all is a miracle.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably. So yeah. So I think that's where I come with it. It's like, if we have a hypothesis and we test it, we save ourselves a lot of pain and we learn. And so every time we kill a game, that's another piece of knowledge. That particular approach didn't work. It's back in the bank of all of the potential approaches we might do next. And so next time, when I then decide of this 100 or so ideas that I might want to explore, which one I'm going to explore, I've updated the language of that particular set of ideas, taking into account the things that didn't work. That to me is magic.
So let's assume someone has done all these things correctly.
Yeah.
They now have an idea that is somewhat proven. There seems to be an audience out there.
Well, let's be careful about the somewhat proven. You could. Okay. This is an argument that my business partner Ella and I have a lot. I as a designer, things like CPI, CPM. So these are numbers of. This is the amount of the cost for getting somebody to pay attention and to actually act on the thing. They aren't revenue.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to remember that they're almost vanity numbers.
Yeah.
And not quite. Their vanity numbers are, hey, I got this much, total number of downloads. Who cares? Having downloads is irrelevant. We had over 1 million downloads for a Cristiano Ronaldo game. Guess how many people played on day 2?
Wow.
Honestly, it was ridiculous. It was a good game as well. It's just that when you had the wrong audience, the audience who only wanted to have something on an icon on their screen that said Ronaldo,
Right.
they weren't interested in playing the game. So anyway, my point being is that you've got to have valuable data points that actually are actionable.
So in amongst all of the proving of your idea, you should probably, you should thread into it actual research on the genre and on similar games, and there is like a whole bunch of stuff that I'm kind of glossing over here to get us to the next little gem.
Yeah.
The next thing that seems to be a thing that kills a lot of studios, and that is building the team.
Yep.
And again, a lot of people are building the team before they've even got the plan in place. We're going to assume you've managed to plan well, and now you're pulling a team together. And this recently, I spoke to a team recently, and it killed the game. It killed the studio, because it wasn't thought out. And it's a similar scenario. So, like, some friends got together. They had game jam together. So they kind of felt like they were safe in the fact that they've made a thing before, and they just go at it. They're like, we work well together. Let's just do it. They start building a game, and they get quite far. But nobody has talked about revenue. Nobody has talked about responsibilities. Nobody's talked about how they make decisions, how we deal with conflict. Like, just none of that has happened. That they haven't planned how they're going to work together, why they work together, and what happens in XYZ scenario. Yeah. And it's a big studio killer that, like, if you've done all your homework well and you've got a good idea, something that looks like it's going to make good on traction, if the studio then kills you, well, if your team forming then kills you, then what good is it?
Exactly. And I think some of that is, I mean, if you take it the different way, when you think about team building. Now, let's say you're going to have to get investment to make this game. Oh, I mean, by the way, there are lots of different types of investment. You could be talking about grants. You could be talking about an angel, friends and family. I don't have friends and family. That's not. I do, but not any that have any money at all. I never have. That's why I've always had to scrabble, hand to mouth, is because I don't have a pool of people who have access to any disposable income that's possible to offer up. But there are some people who do. Great, lucky for you, fantastic for you. And obviously angels are, all the way up to VCs. Any of those people, they're either investing in you personally, or they're investing in, which by the way is a massive responsibility. I feel that pain. Or you're talking about people who have a business approach to it. Their reason for being involved is very simple. What's my return? And you are a bet. You are, one option of many. They're going to make many, and they're going to expect that some of them are going to have a 10x return. Some of them are going to have a fail. Yeah. And they're going to, it's not just fail. When they fail, they're going to write off the fail, that loss of revenue. They're going to write that off against their thing. There's lots of systems, particularly in the UK, things like SEIS and EIS. Ask me about that another time. I'm very happy to tell you a bit more about it. But the point is that you have to be able to justify every bit of spend and why that's going to generate the return you need. So you can't just hire people because you have that. You've got to work out, does having that person actually increase the potential of me getting that needed return? In fact, does it go beyond the expected return? And if it doesn't, I can't afford to hire them. I've got to actually think about every component. Do I actually have to have them? If I, for example, I can't go off and hire a salesperson right now, even though it'd be really handy, because I can't justify that salesperson can bring in an extra, level of revenue above and beyond what I can currently do.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I don't mean that in a kind of oh woe is me. I'm just saying there's some really hard discussions you've got to have, and
Yeah.
that's about being a professional. It's about understanding this is my business's needs,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to be able to deliver this game in the most effective, efficient way possible with the smallest team you can, so you can keep your costs as low as possible, and therefore deliver the best return for that game.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, why would anyone give you any money?
And I think the other thing is this works whether or not like an investor or publisher is involved.
Yeah.
Even if you are a bootstrap team, you cannot ignore the fact that your time is money,
Yep.
and that everyone's time and input and energy is money. And typically, you like if you can't give anyone anything now,
Yep.
then your agreement will be you will be compensated at the end. And
Yep.
even that's a bet that everyone else is taking on this idea that you're pulling together.
Yep.
And so it becomes even more important that you make sure that everyone understands who has what responsibilities. There's this thing that I've said quite a lot recently. I don't know why it keeps coming up, but like if something is everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, we'll all deal with that," or "Yeah, we'll all cross that bridge when we come to it," because what you're basically saying is no one's in charge of it, no one is responsible for it, and when that problem does come along, you're all going to be fighting over whose fault it was because it's everyone's, which is yeah. So
Yep.
so it becomes really important to lay out these ideas like um, who has the final say on the art. Typically, obviously, that's going to be whoever you've decided is your art lead. Who, how are we dealing with the IP? There's a whole bunch of situations around IP, whether or not like the studio owns the IP, whether or not someone owns the IP. Like, is it someone's idea? Is that the cornerstone of the IP? What are you doing with IP being intellectual property? Just so I'm not throwing around acronyms. How are you dealing with when everyone contributes their piece of work? That becomes part of the IP legally. If you haven't exchanged money with anyone, then you don't have a strong legal agreement under the transfer of that IP to the product itself. There's loads of potholes just waiting to take you out.
Yeah.
Um, and then I what I've seen a lot of times is people just saying, "Oh, we'll just do a split, easy split. Like there's three of us, there's four of us. It's a three-way split, it's a four-way split." Um, and then they haven't documented it. They haven't like had a meeting around it. That they haven't decided. Well, what happens if someone wants to leave? Because your four-way split, like, yeah, it could be as simple as that fourth person leaves, and you split that person's with the other three. But what if that person leaves and they want to keep their percentage? Like,
Yeah.
are they allowed to? Is there a length of time around that? There's just so much that people don't talk about
Yeah.
early on.
And they really should. I mean, one of the things I think this Ella was talking about this is like, what is everybody's propensity for risk?
Mm,
I mean, that's a really, really important. I mean, particularly with founders, but not just founders. I think with your initial team,
yeah.
understanding what, because some people in a startup, you might run out of money,
Mm-hmm.
and for some of them, that's okay for a month or two.
Yep.
You might not even have run out of money. You might be waiting for the grant payment to clear. And if you were unable to get paid that month, and that meant you got thrown out of your house, well, that's not an acceptable risk for you, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And it might be, and again, this is about where I This is not about. This is on the assumption that everyone's on the up and up, and obviously, we're people who genuinely want to make sure things, and we make sure we give as much notice as we physically can. I've only once been unable to do that, but that was because of an action that meant that I was at risk with the client because of the behaviour of my particular person. These things happen. No shade on them. It was a mistake. It was just a mistake. Unfortunately, couldn't be got around. So but where I can, I will always try to make sure we give people the right level of notice and so on and so forth. And by the way, it's a horrible thing to have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we have had situations where I had to say to people, we can't pay you yet. We're waiting for the grant money to come in. We're waiting for the investor to pay up. They've committed.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes in. But if you can't pay it, you can't pay it.
And this really becomes a problem when you haven't had the conversations beforehand.
Exactly.
If you haven't been dealing or trying to deal with as much transparency as you can possibly manage, then it's gonna. And I have also, when I was starting out my first studio, I made these mistakes. A lot of it was around just assumptions. Like I just assumed that everyone understood everything and everything. But you need to make sure you have every single conversation clearly, that you try and document everything. Not that you try and document everything, that you document everything clearly. There needs to be you need to really think about what happens if anything goes wrong. You need, even if you have some broad stroke stuff for well, this might happen, but it probably won't. Throw that into a bundle of these are some things that we don't think will happen, but if they do, we at least know what we're gonna do about it. And
no, completely.
This all ties in with something that you mentioned slightly earlier in this discussion on this, which is another thing that kills new founders, new indie studios, is founders who focus almost entirely on the game, the production of the game, putting the team together, but they ignore the business side of the studio entirely.
And it's so easy to do it if you haven't got experience in working in those kind of environments. And being a founder means you've got a level of gamer. I remember when I got the title of CEO, which I thankfully handed back to Ella, I suddenly felt I had to be a grown up because I'm the figurehead. I've actually got the responsibility. I'm being held accountable by our investors, and I had to do the right thing in that context. And it's a massive learning curve when you have to do that step up. I'm used to being I can just come in, stroll up, and give you my advice because I know everything. And the difference when you're accountable for everything is profound. And you, as a founder, have to understand that's what you're taking on. As you bring on more people, that compounds. And that's why I think it's so important that you're clear, you're upfront, you've got good contracts, and there are some great sample contracts out there. I think Yuki still have a whole bunch out there as well.
There's also really great freelancers who will give you their templates and their time for free, their first session free, all that kind of stuff. It's quite easy to get some baseline legal advice. Yes, if you want to do serious stuff, you're going to have to pay by the hour. But again, even if you paid some legal advisor £50 for an hour, you have saved yourself so much pain. And potentially a catastrophe. You don't.
And there are some fantastic people, Harbottom Lewis, Sheridan, various other folks around, Jazz Perel, really, we're talking about lawyers in a nice way. I mean, my goodness, you'd never think you'd say nice things about lawyers, but the games lawyers are fantastically, they're people just as interested in what we're doing, but their specialization is obviously in setting up the contracts. And one of the reasons why they're so interested in indies is not because you're going to generate them lots of hours. It's if you do get that hit, and you're going to need somebody when you get the investor, when you get the when you sell the company, when you exit, all those kind of things, the L&M side of things, that's where the long-term opportunity is for them. But bottom line is they generally are people who want to be involved in content industries, and doing games is more interesting than doing, I don't know, divorce or something. Well, I assume so. I've never been involved in such a thing. Anyway, but I think the thing is, defining the entity is also about defining your culture.
Yeah.
And people underestimate culture. Now, one argument of culture is that culture is your CEO. Now, that's not quite fair, but culture is what culture does. It's not just 3 words on a wall. We always went for curiosity, tenacity, and I've forgotten what the last one. Curiosity, tenacity, and something else. But I love having one of my values personally is my curiosity, and one of the best things about Ella is her tenacity. And so when we do companies together, the fact that we can bring those 2 factors into an experience means that we're encouraging curiosity and tenacity in others.
Yeah.
Because we live it. It is who we are as people. And, that then means that when you're building a startup based around people who exhibit, reinforce, and reward those behaviors, you're also setting the scene of what common endeavor looks like. And I think that's what a company has to be. A group of people on a common endeavor. And if they're not on a common endeavor, guess what happens?
Chaos.
It goes wrong. It just goes wrong.
Yeah.
So, like you say, ownership, responsibility. There's some really good documents out there, books out there. I forgot what the name of it is. There's one book called something like How Big is the Pie or something like that, which allows you to think, actually, how should you share what is the relevant, appropriate level of share of a company that should exist, particularly around founders. And it's so very easy to say, oh, we'll just split it evenly. Now we happen to have done in our company, but I think that there's some really good lessons about actually you should be thinking about what people are bringing to the party, because at the end of the day, you don't want people to feel resentful down the line if what they're bringing to the experience isn't as equally rewarded as others. It can cause resentment. But again, it depends on what you're motivated by.
I think it's also it's like I said before, it's too easy to do. Like, there's a 4-way split. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You, especially like if you're all starting at the same time, you're all putting in the same amount of effort. That works absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But what if,
and also importantly, you're all willing to take the same level of risk?
Yeah. So you're all putting the same skin in the game. But what if 3 of you have more flexibility with your time, and you're able to put in more hours, like daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and someone says, oh, I'd love to be like all in, but I've got this job that actually takes up more of my time, and so I can only do this part-time. Like,
and that's fine.
You could still do a 4-way even split if you all agree that that's absolutely fine. But typically, like, over the longer period of time where you run with that, like, it's going to feel fine at the beginning because nothing's accrued. But after 6 months to a year, people are going to start feeling, whether they like it or not, they're going to start feeling like we're all putting in like double the work of this guy, and he's getting the same stake. This does not feel fair, and that does become a problem.
But it's not always as simple as that. So, for example, the contribution of somebody who might be part-time can be very significant to the impact and the capacity of the company to be able to scale. For example, if you have somebody who's a specialist understanding how corporate structure works, like we have, that's great. That's incredibly valuable. And whilst that person might not be full-time, that's okay, because what they bring is required at the point where you need it. And so you can often offset whether it's share of company or it's share of salary. It's those sorts of things you can play with.
Yeah. But the key thing here is that you cannot ignore this business side of the company. You cannot just go like, if the game is good, everything will work out fine, because
and the
not
business
the
side you're describing so far, I would argue, is more corporate structure. I think the business side goes beyond that, because you've got to think about what business models, what commercial models are you thinking, what markets are you playing at? What,
Yeah.
what is the shape of those markets? How are you going to disrupt or evolve in those markets so that you can attract the necessary scale? So the commercial side, the consumer audience side, the delivery process, the rules and regulations that you live in. There's an acronym, SLEPT, or PEST, so political, social, legal. I've forgotten all the acronyms, but anyway, environmental, technological. There's lots of different acronyms you can use. It's been hang on, how many years? 30 plus years since. Oh my goodness, I think I started in 29 years ago. I did my that's actually, it must be longer than that. No, when did I do it? 91 is when I left. 988. Oh my god, I feel freaking old. But the point is that I did my business HND in business and finance HND back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And the same rules exist. I'm glad I did it then.
Yeah.
But yeah, understanding your market, understanding the economics you're in, understanding the business, understanding the rules and structures around you, massively important and very easily missed. It's not just, it's making a company. In fact, do you know how to make a company? Limited liability, sole trader, the limited liability cooperative. I think there's another option.
Yeah, there's LTD, LLC, sole trader. There's like a whole bunch.
Partnership.
I mean, it's the
limited liability partnership. Yeah.
There's a few. I mean, in the UK, it's not. I think in the America they've got like way more for some reason. But in the UK, it's slightly simpler. But still, yeah, you need to. If your team is if you're a solo developer and you're working with contractors, like that's a whole different setup. Like, yeah, the business side is slept on quite a lot.
Very much so. But also, what does it mean for you in terms of tax? What does it mean in terms of liability? What does it mean in terms of contract? What about your trademarks? Who owns the IP? Are you protecting your IP? Copyright is assumed, but whose copyright is it? Have you got a contract in place for your employees to ensure that the work that they do is yours? Because you should.
Yeah.
And that's not to take advantage of anybody, but you can't run a company and release content. Even in podcasts, as Stuart kindly joins my actual play podcast, and I have to have a letter where everybody says that they're happy for me to put the content out, because I need to know that I don't have to rip it away 10 years down the line. And if you haven't got that in place, you don't own your content.
Yeah, we do that with the GDL podcast. We make sure in the onboarding everyone understands that if you're on the podcast, you are handing over the content that you create over to GDL, and that if in 6 months' time you just, I mean, I would say there's always a conversation to be had. If someone came to me and said, I said something in a podcast episode that actually I really would like to retract and remove, there are ways to do that.
Yeah. And people fall out. It happens, and that's okay. In fact, it's the fact that you if you prepare for it and you have so termination agreements seem scary, but what they are is saying, look, we understand that if things don't go right, it's not a debate at the time. We've already got a methodology behind it. And you might have a term like bad leaver. What does bad leaver? It means that some breach has happened. This is the process we follow. So the emotion down the line is mitigated. And I think that helps everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, you have a great line on this, is studios don't die because people are bad. They die because expectations were never spoken out loud. I think that's pretty much on the money.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's I think we can, there's one other one that I think you and I could do justice to, and I think probably you more so, actually, and
what, me having a lot to say? Come on.
Is studios or founders who believe that funding is the goal, where they out of the gate they just decide all we need is a publisher, all we need is funding.
Yeah, and all that
Ta-da!
matters is the funding, and in result, magic.
Yeah.
But they're not asking themselves why. Why do they need the? I mean, again, it comes back to that why question at the beginning, and publishing is probably one of the most expensive forms of money you can get.
Yeah.
Investment is close second, if not. I mean, somebody was saying an investor. You have a relationship with an investor longer than the average marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What if you don't get on with them?
Yep.
I mean, honestly, this stuff matters. I mean, and what happens when things go wrong? And things do go wrong, even with good experiences. There are times when things go wrong.
And what if you
How are
signed a
they
bad
going
deal?
to respond? Yeah, or it could be a bad deal. We had a situation where at the time the typical deal for an SCIS was 50-50 split because it was relatively used in games.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, it turned out, and you couldn't ask for less than the market norm at the time.
Yep.
And this is a mistake we made. We gave away too much. Now, that's not because I'm blaming the people who we invested in. They were great. But the point was that the market norm at that time for that thing wasn't clearly understood either by them as new investors in this scheme, and this is SCAS, or by us who were relatively new at getting investment. But the point was that by giving away 50% at that time, we had no way of raising further money.
Right.
So what that meant was once we worked out why the game had problems and I now run out of money, I needed to go get, this is again Rocky Horror, I needed to go get more money because I realized I had on my hands the ability to create a K-pop game that could have been a real smash hit in 2019, which would have been 2018 I think it was, which would have been like perfect time to hit the upward rise.
Yeah.
They weren't in a position where they were willing to give us more money. They couldn't take any additional percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, what would be the incentive for us if we did give away much more, because we would get less of the company than they would? Why would we do it? So getting that number wrong at the beginning, even taking investment, isn't trivial.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about, oh, it's fine. We'll worry about it when we make lots of money, because if we make lots of money, it will be good. No, it's about understanding that you're going to probably need to get reinvestment. There's a reason why there's a process, which is, kind of like pre-seed, seed, Series A, B, C, etc. And those things matter. If you don't think about the proportion of investment that you need to hold on to as a founder in order to have control of the company, sure, but more importantly, in order to be able to give up more so you can get more revenue. Now, but not more investment. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we have these differences in these stages is that the first stage is to make the thing enough to be able to prove there's a market.
Yeah.
Product market fit matters. If you can get to product market fit before asking for any money, your cost of investment just has dropped through the floor. Mm-hmm. If you've got no product market fit evidence, why would anyone give you any money? And also, if they do, they're going to want more from you. I mean, don't get me wrong. I hate this whole process. It's not quite fair, actually. It's not. I hate it.
It's rough.
It's rough, but it's necessary. And you've got to understand the investors and the investors' needs, and you've got to respect them and what they're there for and what they're not there for. They're not just a pool of money there to hand out to developers. They're a business trying to understand what's going to make commercial sense, and they're going to have 1,000 things thrown at them, and they're going to pick maybe one or two, maybe three at the most.
I think I think there's the general dynamic always means that, this is especially true of new founders, right? Is that they, like you say, they see the publisher investor as Scrooge, and they just need to convince Scrooge if Scrooge just understood that
If only Scrooge.
that we've got a
But
gem
they're
here.
not Scrooge. They're your partner. They are
Yeah,
the people who you're going to be working with, relying on,
yeah.
needing, and they're going to give you support, advice, and access to a greater network of people that you don't connect with.
I think it's a really good idea to think of it very much like a marriage. Like very
Yeah.
like you're going to be very picky about who you're going to spend the rest of your life with,
Yeah.
and so this person who's going to give you a substantial amount of money,
Yeah.
um, you're gonna need to get on well with them,
Yeah.
and B, you're going to need a very clean and tidy structure um, on how that money is coming in, where it's going, why it's going there, how
Yeah.
the whole thing's going to work, what's the expectation at the end, how much recoup is expected, um, are royalties included, do you get to keep your own IP? Like there's just so much.
And whether you're going for these funders who are doing it more through their love of the game, or professional investors who are doing it because of their need to make a commercial investments on behalf of often their clients,
Hmm.
or family bits with family, what's it called, family estates, whatever, that actually have large disposable income, which they're making more strategic investments in potentially. I mean, I'm mixing up my metaphors here,
Mm.
but I'm just trying to show there are different kinds of investors with different kinds of needs and different kinds of expectations. You have to understand why would they want to give you money. How do you prove to them that they're going to get a return? And I mean prove, not just I've got some great numbers on my data, but this is the revenue I'm generating, and this is how it's going to continue to grow, and this is how we're going to scale it. They have to believe that you understand your market thoroughly, that
This
you
is
are
why I think
professional enough to demonstrate it.
this is why I think like going through grants first is like a
Yeah,
really good testing ground, because you kind of need to do very similar things. You when you're applying for the grant, you have to they're going to give you a whole bunch of questions.
yeah,
You're going to need to answer them all effectively, and you're going to need to and there's a process tied to how and when you get the money. Very, very rarely, unless it's a small amount of money, do they just go, okay, you've answered our questions, here's the money, go spend it as you wish.
yeah,
Normally there's a tracking system and a milestone
yeah,
payout system, and in quite a few cases there's also, especially like these days, there's match funding, so you have to really prove the case that what you're doing is viable, that you and your team can do it, um,
yeah,
and then you have to deal with proving that even though they're going to give you the money, you still have to prove it along the way that you're going to hit the next milestone, um, that they can release the next payment, and that and then again, like it's that whole business side of things, right? If you can learn how to manage a grant, then you're going to do a lot better at managing the business long term. And
yeah,
should that um, should going through the grant system manage to um, get your game to a place where you can actually pitch for funding and investment, again, you've gone through the smallest amount of pain that will prepare you for for potential funding and investment long term.
yeah. No, totally. I think another thing that's worth thinking about with this is um, grants are great mostly because, again, because it's non-diluting, but they do come at the cost of the administration. The administration can be, somewhat arduous. Also, you
Hmm.
have to understand how to apply for a grant, and your timing needs to be good to know which grants to apply for and what the grant committees are going to need to see in what you're offering.
Hmm.
And that's a different kind of thing that if you're going to an investor who will need to see, you know, proof of market fit and proof of scale. Those things are massively important. I think though we're still back to the same thing. Why do you need the money? How much money do you actually need? And if the more you can do without needing the money, the better.
Mm-hmm.
In my situation, I've never had any money, and my my partner, my wife's willingness for risk is very low. So I can't put a mortgage out and on my house and just run it. I'll be divorced in an hour.
Also, if people are thinking about remortgaging their house or mortgaging in order to start a game studio, that's an insane risk. Yeah.
But then you look at some friends of mine who who started a company on 5 credit cards.
Wow.
Yeah, Hutch. John basically, and he says don't do it. By the way, he's fab, and very very much. If you get a chance to hear him talk, he's a fab person. Sorry, Sean. I'm talking about. I'm getting confused between Space Ape and Hutch for a second there. So Sean at Hutch and John at Space Ape. I'm thinking about Sean at Hutch. I don't know if it's 5 credit cards, but a number of credit cards. And it's incredibly stressful. Thankfully, they managed to get an investor fairly quickly afterwards. But that was a incredible team of ex-PlayStationers. And honestly, you can look at the team there now. It's incredible. But you've got to have some gumption to take that level of risk.
Yeah.
I would never do that. I would never recommend that personally.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure you could do it now.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. The way that debt and finance works right now, and also obviously we've had the COVID bubble blip. It's just it's not.
We are where we
are.
Time.
Yeah,
I think the market is recovered in principle, but we are still in very turbulent times, and the rise of AI has meant a whole bunch of things. But there is a caveat to that. If you are a founder, you actually have a massive pool of potential people out there who might be cheaper than they would have been 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to sound cynical when I say that, but it is a reality. And you might find that there are people out there who are desperate to get some portfolio work done. And you might be able to find a way to work with them to get you further down the line to the proof in order to then raise the money than you might have previously been able to do it. Now, I'm not saying anyone should exploit anybody in any way, shape, or form. Please don't take that interpretation. I'm saying if you happen to be a bunch of people who don't currently have an income for games but want to have an income for games, and you together work together to make something that can get some proof of traction, now is a good time to do it. But it's still complicated, it's still hard, and we are facing a space where, whilst there are some AI things that can be good, there will be a lot of AI slop.
And also, I think in this episode already, we've covered all of the things,
all the time
that you need to consider, no matter what you're doing throughout this process. I think
making games is hard. Running a games company is hard squared. Yeah. But can you imagine doing anything else?
Me, no.
I mean, I'm doing tech, but it's still a games tech company.
Yeah. No. I think I've got the benefit of I've had a wonderful creative career. So I've already lived through one wonderful artistic career. This is just my second wave in a different direction. And also I love doing this. Obviously, I love helping people figure it out and supporting indies just generally broadly across the UK.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's as much as we can cover, and we've already gone over our usual allotted time.
Yep.
Any last minute thoughts you want to add, Stuart?
Just take into account everything we've spoken about. You probably do want to listen to this particular episode 2 or 3 times in order to be like, Okay. And actually, if you have questions and stuff, hop into the Game Dev Local Discord. Talk to us about this episode or other things. I live chronically online, and I'm always in there. So, and you can at me in there. You can actually talk to me directly. So, do feel free to do that.
Yeah, I'm not quite as chronically online as you, although I'm pretty close. I'm very discoverable, although I choose to use an awfully complicated thing to spell, which is my original, one of my role-playing characters that became my QuakeNet alias, and I've used it on every social media platform going, and that's Athanasius, Athanateus. But I'm generally Googleable, so please feel free to Google me. Oscar Clark Games is the easiest thing. I'm not the American guitarist or the Canadian cyclist, but I typically will come up top.
You need a bit of work on your SEO.
Mostly, I come up first, so
yeah,
it's all good. It's all good.
I'm quite fortunate. My unique combination of a fairly common name and a fairly uncommon last name has served me well. But
exactly. Well, all good stuff. And on that note, if you have aspirations to make your own games company, it's worth trying. However, you've got a whole bunch of questions. We've tried to give you the best advice we can, but obviously it's something that's a moving feast. The regulations are always changing. The market is always changing. But the heart of it is, why do you want to make games? And if you can get to the heart of that and who you're making those games for, and then build the team, summon the Avengers, build the team, you can make incredible things. And that part of those teams are going to be the people you get the investment from as well, that make it possible. So at the end of the day, the important thing is that we make sure that we create great experiences together. And on that note, if you enjoy this, please like, subscribe, share, all the other stuff, and we will go from this and continue our conversation talking about game development as we move into the next conversation. And we'll on that note, well, this has been your Game Dev Local podcast, and we'll speak to you again next time.